day. I'm Cory Morgan, a columnist with the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline. I'm sitting in for our publisher, Derek Fildebrandt, who usually hosts these things, but I got a great lineup of other folks to fill it in, and we got a lot of great stuff to cover today. So I'll kind of start with just introducing the folks we got with me from the far end. Our news editor, Dave Naylor, is in-house.
Cory, you are not just a columnist. You are the columnist of the year, announced at a gala Western Standard dinner on Friday night. So congratulations. A lot of tough customers to beat.
Thanks. Yeah, I was very flattered. It wasn't expected. I mean, we've had hundreds of columnists all year from dozens of fantastic columnists. So I was pretty lucky to rise to.
You've done some great work, Cory.
Appreciate that.
Yeah.
Well done, Cory.
Thank you, Alise.
Good evening. I'm Nigel Hannaford.
Yes, Nigel is here on my right, and our former opinion editor, if we could see, but I don't know if
Opinion editor
emeritus. I think
Yes, that's what we're going with.
All right. And coming in from the West Coast, we've got Alise Mills. Hi, Alise. How's it going?
I'm good. Good day, gentlemen.
Good. So we got a bunch of stuff to cover. We'll start again on the end with Dave, though, because he's kind of got the news on this. There's been a big announcement from the Alberta provincial government on the pipeline front. What's happening?
Big announcement. Happy day for Alberta. The Premier Smith has announced they're going to start ahead and start pushing for a bitumen pipeline from Alberta to BC. She's brought 3 companies on board, Trans Mountain. They know a thing or two about building a pipeline. Enbridge and South Bay Corporation, and they're going to get together and plot routes and all the various things you need to plot for a pipeline. And then they're going to have it into Prime Minister Carney's major projects office by mid-2026. So, that puts the ball in Mark Carney's court, and especially puts the ball into Premier Eby's court in BC. And he already has had a press conference mocking the idea, saying it's not a real thing. And, call me when you got something concrete.
Yeah, so we'll go to Alise. You watched the conference, Alise. Mr. Eby has jumped the gun. I guess he got a little while. The Globe kind of leaked a bit of stuff too. And he's not responding with much enthusiasm.
Well, I think Dave gave a great lead on that. I'd also have to mention how uncomfortable Premier Eby looked in that press conference. What David Eby is factoring in is that he's lost that green environmental support. That's not a block that he can count on anymore. And he's got his NDP diehards, and he's still got a certain level of popularity in the province, which John Rustad doesn't have. But I can tell he's factoring this in. The problem is David Eby's record on saying no to energy is quite hypocritical. He just seems to hate pipelines. That he'll take Carney's money for pretty much any other energy or energy facility, like his recent agreement with the federal government out at the Richmond airport, for example. But he's looking nervous. The one thing I noticed was, as he stuttered through his press conference, and I don't know if Dave agrees with me, that was not a comfortable looking premier. But it might be because he didn't really understand the details. But he chided Premier Smith by saying, when you have something that doesn't require government funding, let me know. Problem is, and we all know this, it's guys like David Eby and a decade of Justin Trudeau and the gamesmanship that they played in tearing this country up that has forced government to be one of the proponents, one of the groups involved. It should never be this way. And this is a larger conversation for the economy of Canada. Every big announcement has to be a government announcement, and that is so different in the United States. That's almost a rarity down there. So it might spark several different conversations, but I think it's not only a great day for Alberta, it's a great day for Canada. Problem is that Mr. Eby may not even be around by the time this lands in Mr. Carney's office.
Oh, you can always hope. Yes, but you made the observation, Alise, that it shouldn't be this way. And, 10 years ago, it wasn't. Companies got together and they made their pitch. And why is that no longer the case? First of all, I'm all for Danielle Smith getting things moving if she can. Bless her heart. We need more leaders who are prepared to stick their necks out and go and try and get things done. But What Mr. Carney has done is create an atmosphere for investment in the energy industry, which totally discourages big companies. The deal now, yeah, he may approve a pipeline, but it's got to carry decarbonized oil. Decarbonized oil, you say, what could that possibly be? It's the carbon in the oil that gives us any value as a fuel. Well, what they mean is that in order to call it decarbonized fuel, you need to take the amount of carbon dioxide that you used in producing it and push it underground. And that's what there are companies in Alberta who are looking at a way to do that. I'm talking about the Pathways Alliance. The technology has been demonstrated in Saskatchewan at Weyburn. But it's one thing to do it in Weyburn, and it's another thing to do it on the massive scale that would be required to decarbonize 1 million barrels of oil a day. The companies are very well aware of the cost challenges they would have to meet, and Mr. Carney is very well aware that that's likely to discourage them. The other thing that might discourage them is the fact that as a major project, it would skirt the usual approval processes, end up in that little office that he's established within his own government to handle major projects, and who knows by what standards it will be judged and by what connivances agreement could ever be caught. So not surprisingly, the big players are saying, you know what, let's just see how this plays out. Premier Smith is trying to at least clear some of the bureaucratic way ahead for them. Good for her. I hope it works. Every Albertan should be hoping it works because of this big money here. But even if it works, I don't know how it's going to play out in the long haul when you have to measure the price that you're getting for the oil against the tremendous costs of burying carbon dioxide. There's a whole other story there, but that's...
Well,
Sorry, Elise.
The other issue is... Go ahead, Elise.
Go ahead, Alise.
No, sorry. I was just going to say, very similar to the EV mandate. The question, it's very fine and dandy to flood the market with EVs or flood them or put the requirements of a decarbonized bitumen or carbon or decarbonized oil. But the reality is we have $92 million missing that went to friends and family of the Liberals on apparently green research. We haven't invested in these, what is, I would say, commonsensical ideas if you really want to address these issues. There hasn't been a significant $1 billion investment in decarbonization. Carbon capture is not the winner chicken dinner that everybody thinks it is. The companies are spending more than they're maybe even making off of it. It's not demonstrating its real value because it's not hooked into something else. We have a very fragmented regulatory environment. We have a very fragmented clean energy/energy environment. They're still pretty isolated away from each other. We have the ability, we could be a leader in the Western world in how we address these issues, but we keep diverting tons of money, millions and billions, to these untested, unimaginable projects. So yes, we can do, it's like the EV market. We do not have the infrastructure to manage decarbonization. We can't, you can buy an EV, but where are you plugging it in? If we all had EVs, we'd break, at least in British Columbia, we would break BC Hydro's back. So that's my frustration, Nigel, is that there's all this lovely chit chat. And I very much want to buy into it. We all want to be better, right? But the reality is the infrastructure is not there. And then you look at the tremendous amount of...
I'm not into your electric car fantasy. Come on. We drank
No, I don't want that. No, I'd be happy to get a pipeline going. If you want to decarbonize it, fine, great, blah, blah, blah. I just need a pipeline. However you slice that, I want a pipeline. If you want decarbonization, great. But then show me that you understand what it takes to do that. And we have a bunch of reactive politicians in this country that have gotten away with not demonstrating their skill set. There is zero skill set on this file at the federal level.
Alise, they know darn well what it takes. It's not that they haven't been told. What is going on here is that they're not that keen to see the pipeline, or even to see everybody running around in motor cars at all, whether they're gas or electricity. The whole idea of the green movement is less and less and less, but you'll be happy.
It might be because they have politicized the Supreme Court of Canada. So is Carney's office, this project office, immune to the constant cyclical legal litigation that we see on these issues?
You know, one of the issues that we haven't talked about is First Nations. Obviously, they're going to be key to this whole thing. There was some First Nations representation at the press conference with Premier Smith. So I'm sure she'll be looking for, First Nations to be part owners of this pipeline. And there will be some First Nations scrambling to get that part of that pie because it brings in money. Where the problems come in is when you'll get these hereditary chiefs. Like we saw over past years in Coastal Gas, and you get hereditary chiefs and blockades and trains being blocked and all that sort of stuff. So it's going to be a bit of a long road, but I'm hopefully optimistic on this. And Premier Smith said Indigenous consultations start on day one. So
well, did Premier Smith mention at all, though, the No More Pipelines bill and the tanker ban? Because I noticed she had that big list of demands, and the clock's running out on that. She's suddenly gone quiet. Did she draw a line in the sand, and is she jumping beyond it now and kicking a new demand down into mid-2026, or is she going to finally do something? Because, to be honest, I'm starting to find Premier Smith to be high on posturing and low on action. We've got a Sovereignty Act. We've got a number of things. She's constantly threatening to use them. Maybe it's time to get a little more assertive, because the reality is, if Carney doesn't stand, he's got the authority. He's got the final authority. That Bill 5 gives him the ability to cut through a number of the roadblocks, cut through a number of the things. As Nigel has said, he doesn't really want to do this. So it's time to start putting some pressure on that man.
Mm-hmm. Wouldn't disagree with that, Cory. I will say that in doing what she announced this morning, she is trying to do something.
Yeah.
So I'll give her credit for that. Maybe you have to do that first before you go back and start.
As I said, she's put the ball into Carney's court.
Yeah, again,
right?
Like
again.
It was put in with the tanker ban and the No More Pipelines. The reality is, you can cut the pipe, you can trench it. No company's going to put a nickel into that until the pipeline ban is gone and the tanker ban is gone. They're not going to touch it. So I'm just saying her conference perhaps should have come with a reiteration of those demands. Like, we're trying to create the environment to bring in private investment, but we've got those giant roadblocks that still he won't touch.
Yeah, well, the pressure's now there, right?
Yeah,
we've got an actual project. We've got work started on it, so pressure builds on him. But I think you're right. I think Premier Smith has to get more hardline.
Yeah, I'm not saying she's not trying at all. I'm just not sure of how many times can you just keep saying we're going to do this until you realize he's the problem, and we're going to have to start calling him out.
I think the power drive is in the relationship that where you see Quebec starting to wane on their hard stance. Now that Alberta has joined forces or is going to support Quebec in their secular bill, which would be the notwithstanding clause in that whole argument that we discussed last week. I think their relationship is melting. It's not as frosty as it once was. And I think Quebec, as the economic storm looms on our shores in Canada, I think Quebec, who has a very, doesn't have a strong sort of free market economy. It's heavily rooted in government spending. I think they're recognizing the revenue streams that energy could bring and jobs that it could bring to attract more young people and a more diversified investment into Quebec. So there may be that. Quebec is also feeling the same heat that we're feeling in British Columbia on the U.S. tariffs, especially around forestry, for example, and obviously auto. So I think some of the things that I've been watching coming out of Quebec from the Premier demonstrates to me, he even said it last week, he is warmer to a pipeline from Alberta than he has ever been. So things are moving very quickly, and that recession, I think, that's basically here. I know it's here in BC already. Plays a larger part than we may consider. A lot of politicians are going to fall off of that perch or that pulpit that they've been standing on with energy, I think.
All right. Well, we will pull things a little closer. Like I said, I do hope it is something that's going to lead to getting some resources out. It's just ridiculous that we're shutting ourselves in like this for so long. And I wish
it's ridiculous to us. But if you're actually of an entirely different mindset and you're the prime minister, it's not ridiculous at all. This is working out of the way it's supposed to work. You keep making the offer. You keep making it look like you're keen, but you set conditions on it that make it virtually impossible for anybody to finance it or do it.
Well, $100 billion deficit may be looming in the near future. So I would think that the economic genius of Mark Carney would realize you do have to have some revenue flow somewhere. But we'll see if that sinks in or not. He seems to much prefer the Keynesian method. We'll just bore ourselves rich. All right. Well, so locally, we've got the teachers are revolting. In Alberta, it looks like they may be going on strike as soon as this Monday, and parents are on the hook. I think we might be in for the long haul for a bit.
Let me just give you some numbers to chew over. They were offered a 12% raise over 4 years. Teachers with 5 years education and 5 years in classroom experience would be making well over $100,000 for 10 months work. The deal included 1,500 new educational assistants, 3,000 new teachers, to go along with $8.6 billion in new school construction. And Alberta teachers rejected that by 89.5%. They're angry and they've had enough, and they're going to likely go on strike on Monday. To help parents, they're going to get $30 a day to pay for daycare or whatever else they have to do with their kids, $150 a week, and that money is going to come from the teachers, what would have been their salaries, but they're not getting them anymore. They're not getting paid while they're on strike, so that money is going to families, and there's going to be online courses that parents can get the teachers going on. But if I was a betting man, I'd say it's going to last a while, this strike.
Yeah, I think the premier is laying down a reputation as a hardliner on everything that she touches. What we've just been talking about with the pipelines is actually a pretty hardline response, notwithstanding some of Cory's reservations. She's taken pretty strong positions on some of the fringe areas around the Education Act with the pornographic textbooks and in terms of the transgender stuff, she's been very firm. Wait till you're 18, wait till you're an adult. So she is not afraid, unlike some premiers, she does not just sort of see which way the wind is blowing. She's got her ideas, she puts it out there, and my sense is that she's not going to like this, and she will fight them. You're right. This could go on for a while.
I'm liking where she's going already. Again, preparing parents, trying to do what she can. She's already basically signaling to the teachers, too, we're not going to flip and settle overnight, guys. You rejected a good offer. We're going to starve you out a little bit here. Alise, I mean, BC and unions, boy, that's certainly an area, and few things put chills into the spine of a politician more than dealing with a teacher's strike of all things when you have a bunch of upset parents and pressure put on things. But do you think Premier Smith's going to be able to weather this storm?
I think so. If I could give a little advice, I'm a former spinner for the Gordon Campbell government and a little bit of the Christy Clark government. And I'll say there were years where it was just rolling strikes. My child was caught in years of strike action from kindergarten all the way through to grade 6. And I regret not pulling my child out and putting her in the public or private system. I would say that we've gone through some heavy duty strikes here. And I would say that you must hold the line. What I can't understand is I looked at the offer that the Alberta teachers was put on the table by the government, and I compared it to what BC's last offer was. And that in BC, the BCTF's contract actually expires next spring. So we don't have that long. But I would say that Alberta teachers are far, far ahead than almost every teaching federation or association in the country. I think the sticking point, and I think there's more to this as well, they didn't like the book ban. They've got membership, and they're much like the BCTF, and maybe more so at the BCTF. That's quite militant in its approach. They didn't like being told what type of books they should read, what type of literature and conversation they should be having with their students. I think there's some of that at play as well, and they want to push her. And this is a bit of a revenge thing as well. But I would say that I understand some of the parts that the Alberta teachers are complaining about, which is really a federal problem. It has a lot to do with class size caps. And that was a sticking feature and has been for almost 12 years in British Columbia. Each province is seeing almost about a 10% growth in their classrooms. That's a lot for teachers, and every child now seems to have an issue. And without the special needs or special education attached to that, or aid workers, the deal really isn't going to get done. So my advice to the Alberta government is fixate on that, demonstrate to the public that you're coming to the table, because there is a lot of parental support. I was surprised. There's a lot of parental support in Alberta for the teachers, but it's sticking on this issue. And I think that you can bring kids back to the classroom the way that we did once we finally, in the third iteration of these strikes, we relented and we were able to look at class size caps and also the addition of more aid workers. I will say Premier Smith has almost come fully to the table on that. It's just, there's a few numbers there that need to be worked out, I think.
It's interesting what you're saying there about parental support for the teachers.
It matters.
Yes. Well, I have a few people friends in the teaching profession who say that there is a hate on in the teaching profession for the Smith government. It doesn't, I'm not sure what a good deal could have looked like, which would have got past that. They just don't like the idea that somebody else, not just teachers, somebody else has got some firm ideas on how children should be taught and what they should be taught. I mean, you mentioned the books just now, and I mentioned them earlier too. When you look at what we've got there, like, you would have been put in prison 20 years ago if you'd have offered that stuff in a school. So I have to say that if parents are supporting that, well, my sympathies are somewhat diminished.
You look on Monday, as of Monday, the teachers are without pay, right? There is no strike fund to pay the strikers. You know, you normally, if you show up on picket line duty, you get a daily stipend. There is no money for that for teachers. So, Cory, you talked about starving them out. As of Monday, if they go on strike, teachers have no income.
I mean, they got to, pay for the summer cottage for their 2 months off somehow.
Yes, and their Christmas vacations.
And the November vacation. And
there's family day, long weekend.
Arbor Day.
Yes.
You name it.
On these wretched radio ads that we keep hearing?
I don't know.
It makes me... Where do all those union dues go?
It makes me question how financially secure the union is if they can't afford strike pay. Yeah. But that said, there is 51,000 of them. Yeah, right?
I would remind you guys, and I would remind the teachers that it's public knowledge at our fingertips. Just a Google search. The BCTF and the Alberta teachers and the Quebec teachers and the Ontario teachers, and Ontario's an even bigger mess. They have never met a government that they can do business with. And it's been proven with the NDP, the successive governments in British Columbia, the NDP governments from the original, Glenn Clark governments, all the way to David Eby. It's not just right of center or, conservative governments, for example. They like to play that narrative as the big meanie, they're right-wing fascists. They want to crush us. Well, I would look at the comments they made about Rachel Notley. When they were in their negotiations, they were hardliners then. They didn't like her then. They don't like David Eby. They didn't like John Horgan. So this is more about ideology. It's a militant ideology. And unfortunately, I don't think it represents, like the postal workers. And I talked to many BC teachers, for example, they're frustrated by these militant union leaders that get ahead and get elected. And what we noticed is that if we gave them enough rope, they would not swing, but the house of cards would fall down, and they eventually do turn on each other. And that's when you have to come back in and say, okay, we're going to come to the table. We understand the capping of class size. And I will say the capping of class size is a pretty antiquated thing to stand. You hold your ground on, and it's 10 years old. We've all the governments have fought about this. You eventually have to relent, because it is an immigration issue. And with immigration has come some serious socioeconomic problems that we are just not prepared. And unfortunately, the front line is the classroom and our healthcare system.
You know, Alise, I think we have to remember that there are some really good people in the teaching profession. There are. However, only 11% voted in for the deal, and I wonder if that gives you some idea of the proportion of the.
You've got to own it when it's a vote.
So
the rhetoric too, as you talk about with ideology and so on, is mentioned there with our creepy Senator Wells calling Premier Smith the dictator.
Yes.
Which is kind of ironic considering at least she was elected, he was appointed. So if anybody's more of a dictator, it would be that strange little man. But he's really torquing this sort of thing. I mean, we've got a senator stepping between and getting in the way between a provincial and, a school strike going on. Like, this is going to get ugly.
Yeah, it's none of his business, really. And you're right, he is creepy. And you're right, the rhetoric needs to be toned down. And it's only going to get worse until Monday.
Well, the other aspect too, and we've talked about that a lot. We've had, John Hilton O'Brien speak of it. If anything's going to help parents start to reconsider keeping their kids in the regular public system, it's when the teachers do things like this. The teachers union despises the thought of more charter schools or private schools or homeschooling, but it's just this sort of thing that makes parents realize that maybe I like those options better.
Yep, you can see charter school enrollment booming this year.
Yep.
It happened in British Columbia. The private schools and what you guys call charter schools completely boomed, and it's maintained and it's grown in British Columbia because, like Canada Post, BC's education system became extremely unreliable. I'm not joking when I say it was 6 school years of rotating strikes, black armbands as well. The teachers were wearing black armbands, dressed all in black. It horrified the children. It was a horrible time in our province, but private schools, other types of schools have done nothing but extremely well in this province.
All right. Well, let's move along to other schools. And yesterday was the Truth and Reconciliation Day, the holiday Justin Trudeau created for us, or at least for government workers. Real workers still had to come into work yesterday. But the narrative has changed a bit. I mean, they are kind of ramping it down. The Governor General's speech was a little less inflammatory than it had been in the past ones, I guess you could say.
Well, she certainly made no reference to denialism, and after the first release of the first statement from Kamloops, what is that? 4 years ago now, 2021.
Yep.
You came in for a lot of criticism, and there was threats of legislation even to make it an actual crime to deny the whole narrative that
Karina Gould is still trying in the Liberal Party to make it illegal.
Yes. Yeah. Well, she will have supporters in there. I mean, it's actually pretty serious when your government actually wants to make a particular point of view illegal. It's one thing to say we don't agree. We're going to kind of trash you if you put it out, or we might even put you in an Alberta Human Rights Commission if you say it in Alberta. To actually say it's illegal to say this stuff is I don't think we've seen that in this country before. Anyway, the fact that the Governor General did not take the opportunity to emphasize that message, the fact that Parks Canada has now moderated its language in the description of sites. There are some residential schools which have been identified as institutions of national importance, and for a while there they had one narrative. Now they have one that's a little less. Suggests to me that the establishment is looking for a way to actually walk this back a bit, because they put themselves too far out there to be comfortable.
Well, they torqued it up on this story, and nobody will pick up a bloody shovel.
Yeah, that's the thing. You were one of the first people to call it a hoax, and I think that's what it is. This whole thing, millions and millions and millions of dollars spent, given to this Kamloops band that haven't done any digging. The three of us, and we'll bring Alise along, could solve this in an afternoon with a digger.
Yeah,
it would solve the crisis.
And I haven't been kidding. If we sunk a hole 6 feet and found the remains of a child, absolutely bring the RCMP in. Let's get a forensic investigation. Let's get moving and find out exactly what happened. Because the claims are that this happened in the 60s. It's not impossible that the perpetrators, while getting a little old, might still be floating around. But with the fact that they are fighting, I mean, they're actively fighting efforts to excavate there, just keeps telling us there's nothing there.
Yeah. And in fact, the RCMP was specifically called off the case
Yes.
back in 2021. So there's a lot of people who would rather have the narrative out there, be a little uncertain maybe, rather than actually have it cleared up.
Sorry, Nigel. It's turned into an industry.
Yeah.
Right now, everybody's got to have an orange shirt on September 30th. First Nations bands across the country are getting millions and millions of dollars, to investigate these graves. Why would they want it to stop? Why would they want the mystery solved? Answer: they don't.
No. And the
$32.7 million. 32.7 million and counting. And meanwhile, in British Columbia, where I am right now, on the north coast of British Columbia, the outcomes have only steadily nosedived. There's more addiction in First Nations. There's more sexual abuse in First Nations. And yet the upper echelon of First Nations is richer than ever. What I would say on all of this, because you've all made really valid points, and I do want to give a special shout out to City News in Vancouver, who produced a story last night. They interviewed Chief Philip Stewart, who might sound familiar to you. He hates pipelines, he hates energy, he hates Canada. But he was interviewed, and he was talking about 215 children. He said, quote unquote, little tiny baby bodies that we were denying. And City News ran this over and over and over again. So I just want to give a shout out because it really ticked me off. And I have written a note to the reporter because they need to know that is inflammatory and it is absolutely not true. But the other thing I would say to First Nations communities, and not the leadership, but First Nations people that are on front line of poverty, front line of joblessness, front line of there's not a lot of hope. And when you add in what's happening economically in British Columbia, forestry, the tariffs on seafood, I mean, it's the First Nation communities are getting hit left, right, and center. I would ask them to ask their leaders, fine, you continue with the grift, keep with the grift, but I want to know what you've done with the money. I can't fight the grift. The grift has already been paid for. But what have you actually produced for me, my family, and future generations? What have you done for British Columbia? How have you integrated or involved or invested into the economy so that we're growing the future for our people? Tell me what the grift has actually done for us. Or have you just taken the money and run? Because at 32 or 37 point whatever it is, $1 million and no diggers, nothing else than the speculation that in that, or whatever it is, the shadows or whatever that they're seeing, which most people believe is the roots, are tree roots and other pieces of debris. Tell me what you've done with the money, because we can't fight the grift. I can't fight the grift anymore. And I don't think fighting the grift is going to help raise or elevate the voices of the regular average First Nations people that are in all of these communities up and down the north coast that where I am and all across Metro Vancouver, because it's ground zero here where I think the most poverty and pain is.
You make a great point, Alise. And, one of the first things that Stephen Harper did when he became Prime Minister in 2006 was to introduce legislation to make the Indian leadership accountable to their own Indigenous people. That was one of the first things that Mr. Trudeau took away when he became Prime Minister in 2015. So there is more that could be said about this. But with your permission, I'm just going to float a theory. This is a theory, so don't take me to the Human Rights Commission or don't pursue me criminally here. But the way this works is that as long as there is a plausible allegation that missionaries abused and killed Indian children, the guilt blame falling on us is such that it makes it extremely hard to negotiate fair agreements with Native people. Because there's always a thing, well, no, you can't push too hard, and look, they've really suffered. you see. So when you then recognize that our own judiciary is instructed by the federal government, by the Department of Justice, that's sent on courses and told to listen up because this is the way we want you to interpret the law, and you know that they have been told to look at Aboriginal, Indigenous people differently than everybody else, not just white people, differently to, I don't know, the folks from India or Pakistan or anything else. Look at the Aboriginal people differently. You say, well, how is that just? Well, then they fall back on this narrative. So that is my theory, that there are people who want this really badly. And I'm not going to back off quickly, but I do find it instructive that at least the Governor General didn't step right up to the plate and start talking about this the way that she talked about it in the previous years. And that Parks Canada itself, which is, after all, is the government speaking, is kind of backing away from it a little bit.
Well, it's an indication maybe a bit of a different attitude coming from her boss. And I know technically the Prime Minister's not the Governor General's boss, but we know in reality that's where the messaging comes from. So a bit of a change of priorities, I guess, but I don't think Mr. Carney's as interested in diving into that as Trudeau had been either. But he certainly seems to be interested in regulating our speech and our ability. C8 is back. And we're looking to control the internet, control speech, control people's talking. But now the government's talking they could strip internet access from specific people.
Yeah, under their direction, they can order the telecom companies to just like say shut down Nigel's internet. Yeah. Because he said he had a theory.
Because he had a theory. Yeah.
I had a theory, and
just done it, didn't I?
Yeah, and that's against what the government wants you to say, and they can, they have the sole power to say shut down Nigel Hannaford or shut down Cory. It's kind of frightening. It's Orwellian.
I mean, they justify this, Dave, and I think you had this in your article this morning in the Western Standard, that which we encourage everybody to buy a subscription to, don't we?
Of course.
Absolutely.
Western Standard.
In the article this morning, the justification, there's always like this. Well, we've got to go after the people who are laundering money or running drugs and so forth and so on. And so the orderly says, yeah, well, I guess, we probably should cut those off. It always starts like that. It always ends up coming to rest with people whose opinions they don't like.
So, Alise, which one of the four of us do you think would be the first one cut off so we know who to reach out to and try and find through letter mail when the strike's over?
Oh, I think it's you, Cory. I think if there's anyone that's first up to claim first prize, it would be you, probably followed by me. Although I think that there's a few people ahead of me as well. But I'm slowly edging into the list of bad behavior that they would probably cite. Do you remember the first iteration of this bill? So just for a little context, this is now a standalone bill outside of Bill C-63 and outside of Bill C-26. So it's like a Russian doll, Nigel. You guys might remember those. So out of every little doll comes a new, more terribly written piece of legislation. And you have to sort of follow the breadcrumbs on this. But I will say that it was obvious that they, contrary to what Minister Sean Fraser said, it hadn't really addressed the issues. It's taken... it says it's put more guardrails in and it's more targeted towards who they think the offenders are. But the problem is it hasn't done any of that. What it has done is it has acknowledged some of the dangers and problems. And there's some good stuff in there, like you shouldn't, be able to paint your house in swastikas. That's a pretty good thing. But that's just sort of the window dressing. The rest of it's exactly the same as the first two iterations of the online hate bill, which I guess is not technically a third iteration, although there's these standalone breakaway bills that I think are meant to confuse people and not have them see it as part of the larger bill. But I agree with you. All four of us are going to end up having our internet cut off. And you can't help but look at what's happening in the UK, where there has been an Orwellian authoritarian enforcement on free speech. And I would ask, and I think enough groups and enough legitimate groups have pushed back including Canada's top law firms, on Bill C-8. So I don't think it's going to survive, but it's definitely a lesson. And we can never let a bill like that show up in the House of Commons again. And I highly doubt in our future, in our time, that it will come back, because it is a scary bill if you really read through it.
Right.
Well, I suspect it'll get trimmed back in the Senate.
Enforceability is going to be a nightmare with this one. But all right, we'll move on quickly. We'll kind of hit this fast, or I'll just kind of run through it because we're going to get to our parting shots. So the time's going quickly before we get cut off the internet. The temperatures are going down. The cost of living is going up. Natural gas prices, people are wondering why their gas prices are going up. And just there was a few tips on making sure, or finding out whether you're on the regulated rate option. So
they're going to double in October.
Yeah, so that's going to be a big hit, especially if the temperatures go down. So just letting people know, check your bill, look for those terms, and check for those rates of last resort and such. Just a reminder to folks, because it's coming fast. It's sliding under the radar.
Yeah, I did take a look at that, and I guess you look at your bill, and if you've got the phrase ROLR, rate of last resort, or DRT, which is default rate, you may have a problem.
All right, so just check your bills and see what your plan is. All right, let's get on to the final shots. We'll start with Alise quickly, so we don't run over time. And what do you want to leave people with on the parting shot there, Alise?
My parting shot for today is to make sure people understand I'm not denying residential schools. And I think for a large chunk of First Nations people that went through residential schools, it was horrifying. And that is not a history that I'm willing or wanting to deny. But what I won't deny, and I won't stop talking about, is the grift and the millions and millions and millions of dollars that have gone unaccounted for. And I want First Nations leadership to not look at me, but to look in the faces of those who are hurting the most on the reserves, which is traditionally women and young girls, and tell them how they spent that money and how it's made their lives better, because we need to stop the grift.
All right. Dave, what do you got?
One of my heroes died today, Cory, the chimp lady, Dr. Jane Goodall. She was 91 years old. She passed away in Los Angeles, where she was on a speaking tour of the United States. Just did a speech. 91. In her 80s, she was on the road 300 days a year, giving speeches to school children and groundbreaking work that she got a lot of stick for at the beginning of it, when she started noticing the similarities between chimps and humans, and discovered that chimps were capable of using tools. So definitely a life well lived, and rest in peace, Dr. Goodall.
Yeah, well, another life. I was quite very sad actually, to hear that Nigel Wright, former chief of staff to Prime Minister Harper, had died in London at the age of 62, which is really checking out a bit too early. Take this opportunity to say he was a wonderful man. He was a great leader in the Prime Minister's office. A privilege to know him. And, I said at the time, and I see other people have been repeating it since, that he was the one who showed you what the difference between a liberal scandal was and a conservative scandal. A liberal scandal is one where you take money out of the till. The conservative scandal is when you put your own into the till to make things good.
Yes, it was a...
Well said.
Rest in peace, Nigel Wright.
He certainly did his service. A lot of people who did. With me, I'm just going to point out and remind folks actually to look on the internet whilst you can. And Francis Widdowson, who spoke in Winnipeg and was assaulted by a number of First Nations people who were riled up by, it appears to be, university staff to come out and confront her. She was assaulted and will be seeking charges against some of them. It was on video, but again, I'm certain, thanks to the Gladney principles, none of them will really face any consequences. But this is a scary development when we are now physically assaulting people for just showing up on a campus to try and speak. And self-promoting plug, Francis will be appearing on my show next week, and we'll discuss that at a little more length and see just what's going on, because that's a really, really ugly development. That video is very, very disturbing with how she was treated when she arrived there, and knowing that university faculty was at least a little bit complicit in this. And
the guy with her, Paige, he was also
the videographer
as well,
and shaken up. So We don't want to be we're supposed to be moving ahead in the world, not to a place where we fear for our physical well-being when we want to speak out on things. Bad enough with legislative threats to our speech, but physical ones stirred up. So either way, I just want to remind folks that I'll be chatting about that. So thank you, Alise, Nigel, and Dave for this episode of The Pipeline this week. And thank all you guys for tuning in. And I just got to put that final nagging reminder and get online. The reason we can do this, the way we pay the bills and keep the lights on and pay that natural gas is through you subscribing. It's $10 a month, $100 for a year. Take advantage of volume discounts. Keep supporting us. If you've already subscribed, thank you. We really, really do appreciate it. If you haven't, come on, get on with it. And I tell you, it's Christmas shopping time. If you really want to drive your liberal uncle crazy, buy him a subscription to the Western Standard, and maybe it'll grow on him. All right, thank you again for tuning in, guys, and we'll see you all next week.